Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, happy Monday, it's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, we'll cover the gross abuse of our asylum system as 40 migrants on the Bibi Stockholm barge are converting to Christianity in a bid to be given asylum. We'll also have the latest on the manhunt for Abdul Azidi as police offer a £20,000 reward. And we'll get reaction to the sad news that the Dad's Army actor, legendary Ian Lavender, has died. And Rishi Sunak's been in Northern Ireland today, but next Monday he'll be live on GB News.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
Great stuff. That is what GB News was always about. It's about holding the powerful to account. It's giving you a voice, speaking directly to the Prime Minister. No gotcha moments, no journalists making it all about them. This is about you. So that's what I want to know all week. What would you ask the Prime Minister? I'll choose the best questions I get and chuck them in the pot. Email them to me, gbviews@gbnews.com. We've got loads of other stuff coming up. Immigration Incorporated. Is our asylum system being gamed by a shady multi-million-pound industry? I think it is, and I'll show the evidence. That's all coming up. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. The headlines just after 3 o'clock. Rishi Sunak says it's a historic day for Northern Ireland as devolved government returns. Earlier, the Prime Minister met with leaders, including Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill, who made history by becoming the country's first Republican First Minister. Speaking at a visit to a primary school in Northern Ireland earlier, Rishi Sunak shared how the £3.3 billion funding package from Westminster will benefit the country.
I had very constructive meetings today with all political leaders in Stormont and the new executive, and the funding package that we put on the table before Christmas I think has been widely recognised as being significant and generous. £3.3 billion, a focus on long-term sustainability, ensuring that Northern Ireland has the funding it needs, not just for today to deal with the immediate challenges, but is on a path towards being able to provide high-quality public services into the future, because that's what we want, brighter future for the children that I've been spending time with at this school here this morning.
Speaking at a press conference in Stormont earlier, Irish Premier Leo Varadkar pledged that he would do everything he can to help the Northern Ireland executive to be successful.
A lot of everyday issues that need attention here in Northern Ireland, and I know they're going to work very hard on that. We're keen to get North-South cooperation going again, have a meeting of the NSMC in the next couple of weeks, and focus on some of that practical cooperation that works well for everyone on the island. So very keen to work with the new executive and looking forward to doing that.
In other news, Rishi Sunak has said today that he has reformed the asylum system in every way that he can. That's amid questions over how sex offender Abdul Azadi was able to stay in the UK. He's wanted in connection with a chemical attack that took place in South London, leaving a woman critically injured and her 2 daughters also hurt. A £20,000 reward is being offered for information that could lead to his arrest. Detectives say he was last seen at Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 on Wednesday evening last week. Police have also warned that those helping him will face arrest, and they're calling for the public's help to find him. Earlier, our reporter Ray Addison gave us more information on who could be protecting Azidi from the police.
It's possible that he's being looked after by people who don't watch mainstream British news, an indication of that being the appeal that was put out in Farsi, which of course is the language widely spoken by Afghans. However, the message has got out to the Afghan community, certainly in some capacity. The Afghanistan and Central Asian Association, which is a charity that helps Afghan nationals in the UK, has appealed for Zaidi to turn himself in. They've told him to go to the police station immediately. They're saying he must do the right thing, and that this simply has gone on long enough.
An asylum seeker has been sentenced today to 18 months in jail after a woman fell overboard and drowned while he was piloting a boat with over 70 other migrants on board. The 22-year-old continued the journey across the English Channel until the boat was intercepted by Border Force. He told officers that he'd left Sudan in 2021, passing through multiple other countries on his way to the French coast. Despite initially denying any charges, he did later plead guilty to facilitating illegal immigration. The National Crime Agency said today that sentencing shows their commitment to holding people accountable for putting lives at risk. A 39-year-old suspect arrested for dangerous dog offences has been released today on conditional bail until the 5th of March. It follows the death of 68-year-old grandmother Esther Martin, who was mauled to death in Essex on Saturday. It's understood she'd been visiting her 11-year-old grandson when that tragedy took place, with neighbours describing horrific screaming they heard. The victim's daughter says the dogs were XL bullies, which were banned at the start of this month. However, detectives from Essex Police say investigations are still ongoing to confirm the breed of those dogs. British actor Ian Lavender, famous for his role in Dad's Army as Private Pike, has died today at the age of 77. Lavender, who joined the show at the age of 22, held the role for a decade. He was the last surviving star of Dad's Army. He's also remembered for his role as Derek Harkinson in the BBC soap EastEnders. And finally, wrap up warm because a whole day of snow could be on the way, with a yellow weather warning issued for large parts of England and Wales later this week. The Met Office says the winter weather could lead to disruption, with power cuts and travel delays possible. The warnings run from 3 a.m. on Thursday through to the same time on Friday morning and stretches from Cumbria and the Scottish border all the way down to Cambridgeshire and the Midlands in England. All of northern and central Wales is also included in that weather warning. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now we start with the abuse of our asylum system by migrants who are claiming to be Christian just to stay in this country. 40 asylum seekers on the Bibby Stockholm are converting to Christianity, and that's almost 1 in 7 of the migrants in the barge. Now, that's some coincidence. And this comes, of course, after Abdulaziz, who's the main suspect in last week's chemical attack case, was also given asylum on the basis that he was a Christian and therefore could not be returned safely to Afghanistan. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Reverend Dr. Bernard Randall. Welcome to the show, Reverend Randall. Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, adamant at the weekend, echoed by many in the Conservative Party, and that is this appears to be a gross abuse of our system, and no more is this a coincidence than it actually feels like an orchestrated attempt to abuse the system, game the system, and for asylum seekers to stay in Britain.
Yes, I totally understand that concern. Obviously, as a member of the Church of England, as a Christian, I would say Christianity is wonderfully attractive. And so, in a sense, it's no surprise that people who come to this country and meet people from churches who are offering them food, shelter, clothing, whatever it might be, will see the attraction of that and might consider converting. But yes, it's vitally important that the system is not abused by people. I would say that clergy who are approached by asylum seekers, it's not really their job to determine whether they're genuine asylum seekers or not. They should only be taking, is this person genuinely interested in the Christian faith? Is this someone who is wanting to convert from whatever faith or none it might have been? That's what they're there for, not to police the asylum process as such.
But whether they're policing or not, what about if they're facilitating a loophole, a well-known loophole, because there are lots and lots of evidence of the dangers of being deported if you're suddenly a Christian being sent back to Afghanistan or Somalia or lots of other countries like that. Then the story goes, then you can claim I will be in danger, and therefore there's a clear incentive to go down that route if you wish to avoid deportation, isn't there?
It is, and I think clergy should be aware of that and should be somewhat alert. But it would be a very great shame if clergy were also becoming very cynical about people approaching them to say, I am interested in Christianity, I want to know what it's all about, I want to be part of a church community. So it's finding that balance between wanting to be welcoming to absolutely anybody, regardless of background, and also, yes, not wanting the system to be gamed. Perhaps asking a few extra questions would be appropriate, but it's very difficult for individual clergy to make those distinctions. And ultimately, if someone is using that to game the asylum system, there are asylum system professionals with the Home Office whose job it is to determine that rather than clergy. But I accept that clergy should be alert.
Do you think they're being conned? Do you think they're being played this saviour complex, albeit, well-meaning, the desire to save somebody's soul, to give them a better life, to listen to their story in a compassionate and caring manner? That's the very ethos of Christianity. But we've seen, have we not, Reverend Randall, that some of these cases can have terrible consequences. We've seen suicide bombers in Liverpool who converted to Christianity, and now Abdul Azidi converted to Christianity. Is this misplaced faith in the good of human nature placing Britons at risk?
Well, there is always that danger, but equally there must be vast numbers of people who come to this country who don't cause that kind of risk. And so for clergy to try and weed out those very small numbers who are dangerous is putting an unfair burden on them. Yes, the system can be gamed, and that's going to be true regardless of how careful people are. If clergy are ultra careful, nevertheless, some people will find the right words to say, the right things to do to beat the system. And as Queen Elizabeth I said, I think, when creating the settlement that created the Church of England in its current form, she said we shouldn't try to make windows into men's hearts. There is a limit to how much clergy can do. Yes, be careful. Yes, ask questions. And certainly if they're being called to go to asylum tribunals and say, I support this person, they need to be jolly sure about what they're saying and that this person has genuinely converted, because they're giving sworn evidence, I would think. But as I say, there's a limit to what individual clergy can do. They should do that, but we can't ask them to do more than that.
It's part of the issue here, Reverend Randall, let's be honest, that there's an orthodoxy now within the Church of England that flows down from the top, from Justin Welby. The refugees welcome mindset seems now to be the dictated norm. And if you don't agree with that, then you get in trouble. I mean, look at yourself. You dared to challenge the LGBTQ stance of the church, and it got you in hot water.
Well, it did, which obviously that's a somewhat different topic. But yes, there is probably pressure for clergy. They see the way the church is going. The Church of England is very conscious about alleged systemic racism in the church, and so there probably is pressure on clergy to say yes more readily than perhaps they might otherwise do. That's something to be looked at. What certainly mustn't happen, and would be absolutely wrong, is if clergy, whether the senior leadership putting pressure or the clergy doing things as in the parishes, are doing it because they're hoping to score, as it were, party political points about asylum and refugees and immigration. This cannot do. Sacraments of the church cannot be party political, and if they become that, that certainly is absolutely wrong in all circumstances.
OK, thanks for joining us on the show, Reverend Dr. Bernard Randall. Thanks for your forthright opinion. Well, I'm joined now by the former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards. Welcome to the show, Paul. Let's start with this topic. There's been a lot of talk about the asylum system in the UK almost being gamed, being manipulated, and the church being drawn into that process. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the asylum system is broken, and I think what these announcements around people these mass conversions to Christianity show that people are desperate to stay in this country, and they're being told this is a route to do so, and that's the route they're going down. Now, I'm not saying there aren't possibly individual cases of conversion and genuine, people who really are Christian, of course, but if it's happened on the scale that you're reporting, that's rather suggests something else. I don't think it's mass conversion. I think it's an attempt for people to stay here. And so, if you're constructing a public policy around this, you'd have to have far closer, strict checks on how people are being recruited to the church and what they really believe and whether it's genuine or not. Otherwise, the system won't work.
Speaking lots of common sense there, Paul, and if we're on the verge of a Labour government, Keir Starmer getting into power, if you were advising the government in waiting now, what would your advice be? A lot of people are saying that this needs to be the subject of a full-scale political inquiry. Every organisation, every charity, every NGO, every organisation involved in this, when terrible events happen, such as Abdul Azidi or the Liverpool suicide bomber who had a miraculous awakening and became Christians with very, very real consequences. I don't think it's enough to say, oh, well, there's only one or two incidents. We don't know that. We don't know who is among us. We don't know why they're making these decisions. Do you think the Labour Party should make this the matter of a full inquiry?
Well, I think you should judge every public policy where public money is being spent, civil servants are engaged, on what's happening in reality. So there does need to be a test here. But, why are they doing this? Who's recruiting them? To what end? If it is genuine, then that's one thing. But I just think, from a purely dispassionate point of view, just looking at the numbers, it rather suggests something else is up. And, ministers need to get a grip on that. And they need to be well advised and they need research on the ground to find out what's going on. I don't know if a full public inquiry is the right way to do that. I think it needs to be something a bit quicker, frankly. Yeah. But it does seem like a scam.
I mean, a lot of people listening would agree with you, but some of the warning signs are there that this probably won't happen under a future Labour government in the form of Labour's new Racial Equality Act, which has been trumpeted today. And when you dig into the detail of that, Paul, there's something which I think is a kind of indicator of where things may be going. And it's this: the Labour Party have stated that they won't repeal the child migrant cause of asylum seekers. And what that is, for those who aren't aware, is if you claim to be under 18 and it's proven that you manipulated the system to get into the country, you can be deported. The Labour Party plan to get rid of that. So anybody who's under 18 can claim anything and the Labour Party wouldn't deport them. Surely if that's a bellwether of where we're going, we're in choppy waters.
Well, I think a Labour government is not going to be in the business of sending children back into war zones if they are here. We would, protect people who are vulnerable. But the ideas that are being floated today go far, far wider than merely asylum. I mean, all things around equal pay, for example, people, and rooting out some of that racism, which I'm afraid does still exist in our society and our workplaces, and holds British people back. Those attitudes need to be challenged too. So what's being floated today is a much, much bigger plan to make Britain a place where everyone can thrive, and that's what's wrong with that.
OK, Paul, I'd like to just push you on that, because we have the Equal Pay Act 1970, in fact, brought in by the Labour Party, and that is a legally binding piece of legislation which still applies. On the topic of pay inequality now, when you dig into the detail, Chinese and Indian people get paid more than white people on average in Britain. Would the Labour Party, I don't know, ask for their wages to be decreased or for some of that money to be given to other people? Or is it only when white people earn more that there's an issue?
Well, the Equal Pay Act, of course, was to address the inequality of pay with women, which unfortunately does still exist. But the point is that they're making today, the Labour Party, is that if there are these inequalities where people from ethnic minorities are deliberately being paid less because of their ethnicity,
but that's illegal,
or ability, well, it
has been since 1970.
No, that's equal pay for women, and this is a different inequality that needs to be addressed. It's only going out for consultation. If it turns up there isn't a problem, then there's no need for a law. But I think there is a problem, and therefore they're right to be thinking about the kinds of laws that could address it. Because what we do know is if you leave it to the market and to unscrupulous bosses, they will try and get away with whatever they can get away with.
I'm just trying to make the point, Paul, that the better educated people in the United Kingdom now tend to be from Chinese and Indian backgrounds, and they tend to earn more typically. It's the same in the United States of America. No problem with that. That's the free market. That's equality. What I'm saying is, if we're looking at this inequality all over the place, will that also be an issue? Is it only when black people earn less than white people that the Labour Party have umbrage with it?
It's about where people are working in sweatshops or doing long hours, beyond the hours they're being paid for, or doing 3 jobs instead of 1, and absolutely getting nowhere. It's about addressing inequality and poverty. It's not about saying holding people back. In fact, the opposite. It's allowing people to get ahead with a fair wage for a fair day's pay. And if they're being held by a boss, back by a boss because of their colour or race or ethnicity, then the law should step in. I mean, that's what laws do. They fix broken markets, and that's what Labour will do if elected.
All right, cheers. Thank you for joining us. Paul Richards, former Labour Party Special Advisor. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Now, I'll have lots more on this big story throughout the show, of course, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, it's time for our brand new Great British Giveaway and your chance to win 18 grand in cold, hard cash. And here's all the details that you need for a chance to make that yours.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for? It could go towards your mortgage or rent, buy monthly treats, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, Rishi Sunak has been in Northern Ireland today, celebrating the start of a new era for the country. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody. and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. 3:25. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, later this hour, we'll pay tribute to the wonderful actor Ian Lavender from Dad's Army, who has sadly passed away. But before that, Rishi Sunak has been in Northern Ireland today, celebrating the start of a new era for the country. Mr Sunak was accompanied by Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris as he visited Stormont for the first time since power sharing was restored last week. The region's new First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has made history by becoming the first Republican to hold the post since power sharing began. Well, our political editor, Christopher Hope, is at Stormont. Chris, welcome to the show. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, hi. Yeah,
an historic day.
Yes, certainly. I'm here in the Stormont Parliament building, which tomorrow meets for the first time in a couple of years. Just a few hundred yards away from me, Stormont Castle, the executive is now meeting with a Sinn Féin First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, shook hands but no waves with Rishi Sunak first thing this morning. But a big moment here for Northern Ireland we've got the democracy finally restored after 2 years of having this Parliament, not sitting. And that's meant that officials have been spending money and it hasn't gone so well here for many people living here. A 10-year wait for a hip operation, 5 years to see a consultant, all sorts of issues. We only know about those issues in GB, but in Northern Ireland they seem so much worse. And I think having MLAs, people who can respond to local concerns, should make sure that money is spent better and more efficiently, helped by £3.3 billion from the UK government over 5 years. They're currently carving up who gets what job in this new power sharing agreement, but so interesting, I think, to have the first ever Sinn Féin First Minister. But also, aside from that, Martin, we're looking forward to next week, which is we're doing a new People's Panel, People's Forum with the Prime Minister, and that's fascinating. We're going to allow a chance for us journalists to move to one side and allow the PM to face questions directly from our viewers, our listeners, and anything can happen. As you know, they have the best questions, we do our best, but we can't often top the questions from our viewers and listeners, and that's what's happening next week.
Superb. And on the issue of Northern Ireland, Chris, a lot of people saying today, in the more Brexity end of the spectrum at least, that Rishi's being played like an Irish fiddle by Sinn Féin, committing to the border down the Irish Sea, and of course with Sinn Féin at the helm, a lot of talk now turns towards this inevitable sense that there may be a referendum on Irish unification, with all the complexities of what that would mean for Northern Ireland being dragged back into the EU.
Well, that's certainly not the position taken by Chris Heaton-Harris, who's the Northern Ireland Secretary of State. I interviewed him last night for GB News. He made very clear that they are working through these various difficulties. He said, for example, pot plants can be taken across the Irish Sea from Great Britain to Northern Ireland with soil on them from Great Britain, and that's no problem because, of course, the European Union has a jurisdiction to an extent over Northern Ireland, as does the UK, and that's why it is complicated. Now, I asked Leo Varadkar, who's the Irish First Minister, the Taoiseach, I should say, just a few hours ago, where I'm standing here. Will you see a vote on uniting Northern Southern Ireland within 10 years? He didn't deny it, he just said that's not for today. And indeed, the PM, Rishi Sunak, was asked the same thing when he met journalists earlier. That certainly is a feeling that if you see Sinn Féin forming a government, winning the election in Ireland later this year or early next year, you could have the same party running North and Southern Ireland, and that leads to questions about whether we might see a degree of unification. But will that mean a deal with the Unionists? Is a long way to go before you get there.
Yeah, but a lot of people will be saying, though, Chris, this is specifically the cat flap that Brexit left open to Brussels, to Sinn Féin, to a vote for reunification. But aside from that, Chris, this People's Forum, Rishi Sunak, GB News, a fantastic event coming up. You spend a lot of time around Rishi, and you often tell me he's very different off camera. He's much more relaxed. He's a people's person in a way. He doesn't come across like that necessarily in his speeches. What are you expecting from Rishi when he gets up close and personal with voters in this unique situation?
Yeah, that kind of Rishi Sunak that I do see in my privileged role here as GB News' political editor isn't often seen by the people. Often he's in this kind of adversarial position of being grilled by journalists trying to find some gaps in his armoury, so he pushes back quite hard. But I think there is that side to him which isn't seen much. I've seen some of it in private when I've been with him on trips around the world, but also I think we do see it a bit when he does his PM Connect events, most recently in Accrington Stanley Football Club. So it's going to be an unmoderated Q&A with the PM, 8 till 9, Monday next week. Do sign up if you want to. If you're watching or listening, make a note of this email address, website address, gbnews.com/PM. We're using Servation to ensure that the audience we have for this event will be chosen from across the UK. Our colleague Stephen Dixon, the GB News breakfast presenter at weekends, he'll be in charge of making sure it all runs smoothly. But the questions, we don't know what they are. Anything can happen. It'll be must-watch TV, 8 PM next Monday. But crucially, if you're watching this, listening to this, want to be part of it, sign up now. You will not regret it.
OK, superb, Chris. So the People's Prime Minister's Question Time live on GB News. It's a magnificent event. Thank you very much. I just think this is the great thing. This is why the channel exists in the first place, to hold the powerful to account. Now then, let's cross quickly to the House of Commons, where the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is giving a statement about the third wave of airstrikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen.
They've conducted around 40 attacks against commercial and military vessels. Despite repeated warnings, their attacks have continued. Mr. Speaker, the UK has always stood up for the rules-based international order. And since the Houthis began their illegal attacks, we've been at the forefront of the international response. Whether helping defend vessels in the vicinity, as one of the first members to join the US-led task force Operation Prosperity Guardian, or whether working in tandem with the US and other allies to tackle the Houthis, always in response to specific threats, and always in line with international law and the principle of self-defence. On two previous occasions, we've been required to use force, and these attacks have had a significant effect on degrading Houthi capabilities. But the Houthis' intent to continue disrupting the Red Sea has not been fully diminished. 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister came to the House to make it clear, as I did the following day, that unless Houthis desisted from their inflammatory actions, we would not hesitate to act again. Yet, instead of ceasing their activities, they have chosen to persist, accompanying their increasingly incendiary rhetoric with further missiles and drones targeted at shipping and at the Royal Navy. Most recently, they set the vessel Marlin Luanda on fire and targeted HMS Diamond directly in the Red Sea. Mr. Speaker, such behaviour is simply intolerable. It breaks international law. It's already having consequences which are damaging to the economies of the world, and insurance premiums have rocketed tenfold since the start of December. The number of cargo ships transiting Bab al-Mandab has fallen, and the cost of containers has rocketed, all of which could send food inflation spiralling and will certainly hit those countries with the greatest poverty levels the hardest. Mr. Speaker, the Houthis believe they are the region's Robin Hood. But as I discussed with the Yemeni Defence Minister just yesterday when I saw him in Saudi, the only people they are robbing are innocent Yemenis, whose food and aid arrives via the Red Sea. And that is why, at the weekend, the Prime Minister and I again authorised the use of force in strict accordance with international law and in self-defence. On Saturday, Royal Air Force Typhoon, supported by 2 Voyager tankers, joined the US forces to conduct further precision strikes against Houthi locations in Yemen. The Typhoons employed Paveway 4 precision-guided munitions against 3 military facilities, hitting 11 separate targets which were identified after a very careful analysis at those 3 locations, and they were approved by me. At As-Salif, due west of Sana'a on the Red Sea coast, our aircraft targeted a ground control station inside a defensive position. The station has been used to control Houthi attacks and reconnaissance drones launched from further inland and operating over the Red Sea and hitting international shipping, or targeted at. A second drone ground control station was confirmed to be Al Manura on the same stretch of the coastline. As with Al-Salif, the station provided direct control of reconnaissance and attack drones targeting shipping in the Red Sea. Its position on the coast, allowing it to maintain line-of-sight data links used to target innocent shipping with accuracy. Our Typhoons also attacked a significant number of targets at Bani. The House may recall that an initial group of facilities at Bani were successfully struck by the RAF on the night of January the 11th this year. Since then, a further set of buildings at the site were positively confirmed as involved in the Houthi operations and were, as a result, targeted on this occasion. As is standard practice for operations by the RAF, the strikes were very carefully planned to ensure minimal risk of civilian casualties. Dropping munitions at night further reduces such risks. And we do not believe that there were any civilian casualties on Saturday night. Mr. Speaker, military action can only be one element in our efforts to confront these global challenges, and military action is indeed the very last resort. It would be far better if the Houthis simply stopped their attacks. So our approach is founded on 4 pillars. Firstly, we're increasing diplomatic engagement. The Foreign Secretary travelled to the region and met his Iranian counterpart last month to make clear they must cease supplying the Houthis with the weapons and the intelligence and use their influence to stop these Houthi attacks.
Okay, and that is Grant Shapps speaking currently in the House of Commons on that fresh wave of attacks on Houthi targets in the Red Sea. There's much more on that story on our website, gbnews.com. Now, police are offering £20,000 to anyone who can help them find chemical attack suspect Abdulazidi. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
So the highway code was amended recently. Passed me by, but anyway, a new poll suggests this has made no difference to the safety of road users, and I could believe that.
Yeah, there was an awful crash in London, wasn't there? A bus and a pedestrian yesterday.
Fatality.
So we're asking, is the highway code fit for purpose, or should we just scrap it altogether? That's our debate this morning, and we're joined by Danny Kelly. She argues highways are not fit for purpose, and cycling instructor Anna Hughes thinks they are. Good morning to you both.
You see, Anna, I think it's a good thing. I think the highway code is a good thing. I just don't think that any of us pay any attention to it, or we should all be tested on it quite regularly, I would have thought. We should have revision courses in it.
Yeah, I think you just summed it up, Eamon, by saying the changes passed you by. I actually asked a few of my fellow cyclists and pedestrians, what is classified as vulnerable road users, about this very thing. I said, has the new highway code made things safer for you? And most people said, not at all. Drivers don't know what it is. They don't know what the changes are. They probably don't know what the rules are to start with. And as you've just said, doing refreshers is a really good idea. It's a bit bizarre that we're given a license to operate this quite dangerous machinery, and then we're never tested again, and especially not on the highway code, which is, especially when it changes, why wouldn't we be retested on that or have to do refresher courses on it? You know, there are conflicts on the road, there are fatalities. It makes sense to be aware of what the highway code says, because it is there to keep us safe.
Yeah, Danny Kelly, when I think back, I think it was 1999 I passed my driving test. Hardly any bikes on the road then, to be honest, probably virtually none.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
Welcome back. It's 3:41. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Later this hour, we'll pay tribute to the Dad's Army actor Ian Lavender, the legend who has sadly died at the age of 77, of course, Private Pike. Now, a Labour government would introduce a Race Equality Act that would give equal pay rights to black, Asian and minority ethnic staff. Sir Keir Starmer's party will give BAME employees the same rights as women. Well, let's get the new views now of the former political secretary to Tony Blair, John McTernan. John, welcome to the show. Seems like a great idea on paper. I mean, equal pay, who could argue with that? But we've had that since 1970, haven't we? And the Labour Party introduced the Equal Pay Act then. What's the difference this time around?
It's about extending the rights that women have in the workforce to black and ethnic minority workers. And so it's just extending that. We know how hard it is in the modern workforce. If you're not in a trade union, how can you get equal pay? How can you actually know what equal pay is? You know, we've had to have a process of gender pay audits to start to expose some of these things. We're going to need to have the same approach to ensure that black, Asian and minority ethnic workers aren't discriminated against. I think it's quite right. It's 21st century, after all.
OK, John, a similar equal pay plight by Birmingham City Council recently basically bankrupted the entire council, and that's the Labour-ran council. Is that a taste of what this would do to the entire country?
No, it's the Muppets who ran Birmingham City Council that bankrupted it. They knew for decades that they were fighting a fair claim by trade unionists to get equal pay for women, to refuse to accept that women's work is of equal value to, say, bin men, was just wrong. And they should have planned for it. They should have managed their finances properly. As a consequence, women are getting their right pay. I think it would be wrong to say we can't possibly pay you that because we've not thought about it, we've not planned for it, we've mismanaged the accounts. We have to have equal pay. It's a principle in our country, equality.
I agree. So, John, one of the things about the category BAME is it's quite all-encompassing, but when you drill into it, there's some interesting detail, and that is quite often the typical salary, the average salary for example, Chinese and Indian people is actually higher than the average white Briton gets. What will the Labour Party do about that? Demand they get paid less or give some of their salary back to white people?
We're about equaling up. We're not about levelling down. The point is that people should, for the same work in the same workplace, get fair and equal pay. We've seen, as in the Birmingham case that you've cited, that women doing work of similar complexity, of similar demands, were being paid less than the men were, blue-collar men were, and that is because sort of built-in assumptions, patriarchal assumptions about what pay is worth. In this case, we're saying there's a power now to find out what's being paid, and if what you find out is you're being paid more than other people, then you don't need to worry about equal pay. But there are many groups in workers. We know this because unions have worked hard with particular work groups of workers. We know they need this power, and that's all about it. It's about being a proper government supporting workers, making work pay. That's what Angie Rayner has been saying all around the country. It was one of the big successful Labour slogans last year in the Rutherglen by-election, making work pay. You're going to hear it again and again and again from Labour.
But is it just about affording extra powers to ethnic minorities? A lot of people are saying that's what the Labour Party is all about. And if, for example, you're a white working class person earning less than anybody else, will they also qualify, or do you only qualify based around the fact you're a part of some suppressed minority interest group? What's the detail?
This is about race equality. So it is about BAME workers. For all workers, Labour's Charter of Workers' Rights, this new rights for workers, New Deal for Workers, is going to give trade unions greater access to workplaces, to unionise, to organise. And so, yeah, if you are a working class worker of whatever race or gender, you are, on average, 10% better off if you are represented by a union than otherwise. Joining a union's the smartest thing you can ever do to increase your pay. And under Labour, there'll be more access by trade unions to workforces. There'll be fewer obstacles from employers to stop people balloting, and there'll be greater organisation. I think that'll be a good thing. We've seen the benefit to Uber drivers of the GMB unionising them in the way that TNG offered union membership to black cab drivers in the past. And so I think, you can see a different arena for workers' rights with a Labour government, which I hope we'll get this year.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. John McTernan, former political secretary to Tony Blair. What do you think out there? Is this a guise to get more people to join unions and to get more union dues, which of course get paid to the Labour Party? Let me know your opinions. Now, just a few minutes, we'll cross live to Liverpool, where senior politicians are trying to map out a future for the North without HS2. But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we're looking at the successes of British manufacturing around the country.
Over the years, the engineering and manufacturing environments have often been perceived to have been dirty and polluted, but so much has changed in recent years. James, why is that?
I think there was generally an acceptance that that was the atmosphere that people were having to work in. There was nothing they could do about it. People would come into work and just say, well, that's my lot in life. However, if you think about it, this is not really acceptable, and certainly in today's environment, take an office, you wouldn't be expecting to work in an office full of smoke, mist and dust. People would be walking out, and people are thinking, well, hold on, I shouldn't have to do the same in a manufacturing environment. And people want a cleaner place to work.
And how are you managing to do this?
Well, Filter Mist manufacture a range of products that extract oil mist, dust and fume at source from industrial settings around the world, and we make them right here in the Midlands.
And you've had your record year.
Yes, we have. We've continued to grow our exports to over 60 countries worldwide, but one of our biggest growth areas has actually been the UK. One of the reasons for that is that we sell a lot to the machine tool sector, who are fitting our equipment to their machines and selling a complete turnkey package which includes clean air to their customers. Meanwhile, the UK government's health and safety executive have focused more on clean air in the workshop. But most of all, people are just wanting, and why wouldn't you want to work in a cleaner environment?
Magnificent. Britain doing magnificently despite Brexit. Now, 4 months after the northern leg of HS2 was scrapped, senior politicians have been discussing the future of transport in the north of England. And our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is in Liverpool. Sophie, welcome to the show once again. So the great and the good are planning a revolution of transport in the north, but been a big setback. HS2 got cancelled. What's the latest?
It did indeed. Now, some of our viewers may well be wondering why this is always such a topic of conversation, and indeed why transport in the north is deemed to need its own convention. Well, I did a little bit of Googling earlier. If I were to get the train down from here in Liverpool, where the conference is, down to our studio in London today, it would be £72.70, and a return ticket, if I wanted to get home again, would be over £100. Now, I also looked up some flights from here in Liverpool, and I could fly to Poland, Switzerland, the Netherlands, France or Spain on a return flight, all for cheaper than that. So there really is some kind of issue here. Now, today we've been hearing from various experts, including several of the mayors from here in the north. Just one of those is Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester. He, of course, has been very vocal about the issues surrounding transport in the north of England, especially trains and HS2. So here's what he had to tell me a little bit earlier on.
It's a full decade now since George Osborne started what we now call levelling up by promising a northern powerhouse. Rail services have gone backwards in that time. They are worse today than they were back then. We should have a modern railway system that's of an equivalent standard to London and the South East. And until we get it, I'm afraid I'm going to be like a stuck record on this theme.
But of course, the actual transport isn't the only problem. Today, they've discussed things like diversity, how we can make transport greener, the economy here in the north of England. Now, these are all incredibly complex issues, but one thing they've all agreed on is that as it stands, transport in the north is nowhere near as good as it should be compared to what it is in the capital.
So, Reba, thanks for that. I would totally agree. It's not just the north, though. Trains all over the shop, all over the country are slow, overpriced, if they even exist at all. You try getting from Nottingham to Lincoln, you can more or less jog faster. Now, we now to some sad news, and the Dad's Army actor, the legend Ian Lavender, has sadly passed away. He was 77. Lavender played, of course, Private Pike in the great comedy, and he was involved in the show's most famous scene.
I am making notes, Captain. And your name will go on the list. And when we win the war, you will be brought to account.
You're right, what you like. You're not going to win this war.
Oh, yes, we are.
Oh, no, you're not.
Oh, yes, we are.
Whistle while you work. Hitler is at work. He's half army, so's his army. Whistle while you...
Your name will also go on the list. What is it?
Don't tell him, Pike.
Pike.
Oh, it's a sad day, but marvellous, marvellous memories. And to discuss Ian Lavender's legacy is the comedian Diane Spencer. Diane, welcome to the show. I mean, that, for me, is just a comfort blanket in TV format, a legendary show that makes us feel great to be British. But Ian Lavender passing away, sad moment, nevertheless.
Oh, it is a sad moment, but he was such an incredible and accomplished actor. Ian graduated from the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, so, you know, one of the top prestigious drama schools that we've got in this country. And he went straight there. In 1967, he was on stage almost immediately. He got his first television show, and Dad's Army was actually his second television show that he got in 1968, just 1 year after he graduated. And ever since then, he's appeared in television, he's appeared in film, he's done a lot of stage work. He was on the West End in London. He was playing Monsieur, oh, that man's name, Monsieur Howard in, Monsignor Howard in the What About the Nuns? Sister Act the musical. He was a very accomplished and multi-skilled actor, and he seemed to be quite a lovely bloke as well. And he said about Dad's Army, he said something that he found really good about it is that you could watch it without baggage. He said that, you know, we were making it in 1968, so we were making it after everything had happened, but you could come to that show and just watch it with your family and enjoy it, and you didn't need to know all of the actual goings on. And that was what he felt made it quite an iconic series that continued through the ages and really makes us laugh even now.
And Diane, also, not only has Ian Lavender passed away, but also that sense of humour, that sense of being proud to be British, yet not afraid to mock our ridiculous insecurities about it.
Definitely. I mean, it was such a British programme, Dad's Army, wasn't it? I mean, you know, you have all of these marvellous pensioners and they're going to defend us from Hitler's armies coming in. It was absolutely fabulous. And he, as an actor, really demonstrated such skill in the way that he could play hapless, you know, because being able to play dumb and hapless and you idiot boy, you know, being able to sort of communicate all of that on television, so incredible, really. And do you know what? He didn't have his Edinburgh Fringe debut, which is something that as comics, we all sort of go to the Edinburgh Fringe. He didn't have his debut there until 2013, which is incredible. I mean, you've got this amazing actor who has appeared in multiple programmes, and then he goes to the Edinburgh Fringe, and he was in a Shawshank Redemption play. You know, so versatile.
OK,
Yeah.
Diane Spencer, we have to leave it there, but I know what I'm doing tonight. I'll be straight on to UK Gold to have a blast of that fantastic theme song. Now, there's fresh evidence today of abuse of the asylum system. 40 migrants on the Bibi Stockholm converting to Christianity. I'll be joined by Lee Anderson right after this.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Many of us will see a bit of rain at times through the next few days, but as we see something colder later on in the week, there's also the risk of some snow. For the time being, we have a frontal system still lingering across parts of Scotland. This has already brought a fair amount of rain so far today and will continue to do so as we head into this evening. But the rain pushes its way southwards overnight into southern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later northern England. To the north of this, we will see some clear skies, but also a scattering of showers and some colder air. So watch out for the risk of some sleet, some snow and also some icy patches tomorrow morning. A milder start though further south, many places staying in double figures overnight, though it is going to be rather cloudy with a few spots of rain. As we go through tomorrow, that rain band then will continue to edge a bit further southwards, pushing into more central parts of England and also Wales, staying drier towards the south, though a largely cloudy day here. Any sunshine will be pretty limited. A greater chance of seeing some sunny skies further north of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a scattering of wintry showers because we have colder air here, temperatures getting into mid-single figures at best. Further south though, highs around 14 Celsius. As we go later in the week, we're likely to see a weather system pushing its way up from the south, hitting colder air, and so that could bring some significant snow, particularly to central parts as we go through Thursday. Bit of uncertainty as to the detail as to exactly when and where we will see the snow, but it does look like things will be colder for many of us, but milder in the south. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had, obviously I was in no pain or anything like that, I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. In the show today, we'll cover the abuse of our asylum system as 40 migrants on the Bibby Stockholm magically convert to Christianity in a bid to be given asylum. Up to 2,000 migrants are due to be housed at RAF Scampton and will cross live to the historic airbase, of course, the site of the historic Dambusters, after reports of violence there over the weekend. And we'll have the latest on the manhunt for Abdulazidi as police offer a £20,000 reward. And Rishi Sunak's been in Northern Ireland today, but next Monday he'll be live on GB News.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
Now that, sweet viewers, is what GB News is all about. Holding the Prime Minister to account. No Ponzi journalists, no gotcha moments. You, the people, putting your questions direct to the Prime Minister in real time, recorded live. I think that takes a lot of guts. I think that's progressive. I think it's a great thing. Let me know. What would you ask Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister? Send your questions to me, gbviews@gbnews.com, and I'll put the best in the pot, and hopefully you can ask them to Rishi. I've just been joined in the studio by Lee Anderson. He's in a rambunctious mood over all the asylum abuses going on. It's going to be a cracking hour coming up, but before all of that, time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom tonight is that Northern Ireland's First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, says more money is needed for public services in Northern Ireland. It comes after meeting with Rishi Sunak to discuss Stormont's finances, where power sharing has returned. However, speaking at a visit to a primary school in Northern Ireland, the Prime Minister said the new £3.3 billion funding deal is already significant and generous.
I had very constructive meetings today with all political leaders in Stormont and the new executive, and the funding package that we put on the table before Christmas I think has been widely recognised as being significant and generous. £3.3 billion, a focus on long-term sustainability, ensuring that Northern Ireland has the funding it needs, not just for today to deal with the immediate challenges, but is on a path towards being able to provide high-quality public services into the future, because that's what we want, brighter future for the children that I've been spending time with at this school here this morning.
Rishi Sunak. Well, speaking at a news conference in Stormont, the Irish Premier Leo Varadkar pledged to do everything he could to help the Northern Ireland executive be successful.
A lot of everyday issues that need attention here in Northern Ireland, and I know they're going to work very hard on that. We're keen to get north-south cooperation going again. have a meeting of the NSMC in the next couple of weeks and focus on some of that practical cooperation that works well for everyone on the island. So very keen to work with the new executive and looking forward to doing that.
Leah Varadkar. Now, the Defence Secretary says the UK will, if necessary, not hesitate to respond once again against the Houthis in self-defence. The Prime Minister earlier said their illegal campaign in the Red Sea is having economic consequences worldwide. The White House says the US plan to launch more airstrikes at Iranian-backed groups in the Middle East is going to happen in the coming days. But rebel leaders say the latest UK-US airstrikes won't stop them targeting ships. Grant Shapps updated the Commons on the escalation in the Red Sea.
Mr. Speaker, military action can only be one element in our efforts to confront these global challenges, and military action is indeed the very last resort. It would be far better if the Houthis simply stopped their attacks.
Grant Shapps. Now, staff at a food store in Newcastle, where Abdul Azidi visited, say they're horrified he's connected to a chemical attack in South London. Speaking to the Telegraph newspaper, the workers described Azidi as a good Muslim. A £20,000 reward is meanwhile being offered for any information that could lead to his arrest after last week's attack injured a mother and hurt her 2 young children. Police have warned that those helping him will face arrest and have called for the public's help. Meanwhile, 40 asylum seekers on the Bibby Stockholm barge have reportedly converted to Christianity, raising concerns that migrants are claiming to change their religion in order to stay here in the UK. It's reported 1 in 7 of the 300 migrants on board the vessel, currently parked up in Dorset, are attending local churches, fueling concerns about the role churches have in asylum claims. The Transport Minister, Hugh Merriman, says the government's making good progress to reduce the number of illegal migrants crossing into the country.
There's action that's on the new laws that we need, and there's also action on reducing the amount of cases that are outstanding. And we've had a huge number that have been reduced in the last year. We've also reduced the number of illegal migrants crossing by 36% in a year as well. So there's progress, but it actually tells us that we need to continue to clamp down, both using powers from Parliament and also using the resources we have to get those numbers reduced.
Well, an asylum seeker has been sentenced to 18 months in jail after a woman fell overboard and drowned while he was piloting a boat with over 70 migrants on board. The 22-year-old continued his journey across the English Channel until the boat was intercepted by Border Force officials. He told officers he'd left Sudan in 2021 and made his way to France. Despite initially denying any charges, he later pleaded guilty to facilitating illegal migration. The National Crime Agency says today's sentencing shows their commitment to holding people accountable for putting lives at risk. Now, weather news, a whole day of snow could be on the way, with a yellow weather warning issued for large parts of England and Wales for later this week. The Met Office saying the winter weather could lead to travel disruption with power cuts and delays for trains. The warning runs from 3 a.m. on Thursday to the same time on Friday morning and stretches from Cumbria and the Scottish border town right down to Cambridgeshire and the Midlands in England. All of northern and central Wales is also included in the warning. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen right now, or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts. Back now to Martin.
Thank you, Polly. Now let's get stuck into this next hour. And we start, of course, with the abuse of our asylum system by migrants who are claiming, as if by magic, to be Christian just to stay in the country. 40 asylum seekers on the Bibby Stockholm are converting to Christianity, and that's almost 1 in 7 of the migrants on the barge. This comes after Abdul Azidi, who's the main suspect, of course, in last week's chemical attack case, was given asylum on the basis that he was a Christian and therefore could not be returned to Afghanistan. Can you see a pattern emerging anywhere? Well, I'm joined now in the studio by the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson. Lee, this is something you've been very outspoken on over the weekend. It would seem to a lot of people a flagrant abuse of the system, this backdoor to guaranteed right to remain by magically converting to Christianity. What's your take?
Well, Martin, it's been no secret I've been quite vocal on this over the past 3 to 4 years. The asylum system is being abused. I've always said this, even when that place over there sort of disagreed with me. I think more and more parliamentarians are actually seeing it for what it is now. It is being abused. And look, when somebody can go to church and hoodwink the local vicar into thinking that they're all of a sudden a Christian, just to stay in this country, that's absolutely shocking. And, you know, one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not lie. And it would appear that the church is complicit and encouraging these young men, these illegal migrants, to turn up at the congregation on a Sunday and pretend that they're Christians, again, abusing our asylum system. But there is a silver cloud here, Martin, to this story, because I've got good news for these born-again Christians, that if you are a Christian, a genuine Christian, then Rwanda is, I think, 95, 96% a Christian country. So they're waiting for you with open arms. Go there, resettle in a safe Christian country.
I don't think they saw that one coming.
Didn't see that coming.
I don't think that was part of the plan. But what is part of the plan, Lee, is there is a well-organised infrastructure, a network, I would even call it an industry, behind this. Alpha International is an organisation worth £16 million per year. They go into prisons, good work you might say, to talk to convicts and inmates, but increasingly they seem to see it as their work to talk to asylum seekers with a view to introducing them to their local congregation with a view to them remaining. You've been very vocal before about charities helping asylum seekers to get into Britain. Do you think this is starting to feel like a joined-up network of getting asylum seekers to the country and then keeping them in?
It is an old industry, Martin. I was on the beaches of Cali last year at the migrant camps, as you well know, and there was a charity there called Care for Cali. And they were encouraging these young men to the camps in France. They were feeding them, clothing them, giving them shelter. They was giving them new mobile phones, data. And the thing that shocked me the most was they've got little tents set up as schools teaching these young men how to speak English. They were getting them ready for this perilous journey across the Channel, and then waiting for them once they got here in the hotels to walk them through the asylum process. Now, these people, these NGOs and the other charity that he mentioned there, these are as bad as the people smugglers. They're part of a multi-million-pound industry, and if we don't sort it out, I feel like a stuck record, Martin. You know, my solution has always been, from day one, send them straight back to France the same day. If we'd have done that 3 years ago, this problem would have stopped now, but they keep coming and coming. And these do-gooders, the lefty lawyers, even the church is involved now. All they're doing is encouraging more and more young men to come to this country.
To play devil's advocate for a moment, back in the day, missionaries would go to far-flung countries with a view to passing on their enlightened values to overseas residents. Do you think there's something of that Justin Welby flowing downwards? Do you think they possess a more enlightened attitude and therefore they're passing that on? And people like you, people who disagree, you're the heathens.
Well, the problem with people like Justin Welby, now, I'm sure he's a good man who means well, but he doesn't live in the real world, Martin. He lives in a place called, well, in my neck of the woods, I'd probably say Cloud Cuckoo Land, where he has no idea what the actual people of this great country think. They are sick to death of seeing this nonsense on a daily basis. The first job of a government, of a country, of the state, is to protect our borders. And these young men are coming in. We've seen the horrible crimes earlier reported on GBNews about this illegal migrant that claimed asylum through Christianity, went on to commit some horrible, horrible crimes. And people like Justin Welby, they sit there in their ivory towers, thinking they're of a higher being, and thinking that they're doing good in this community. And we're not. What we're doing, Martin, it's important to say this, actually slowly we're sort of giving our country away to different cultures, different backgrounds, young men coming in that don't respect our values, they don't respect our heritage, our culture, certainly don't respect women. We've seen that recently.
And when we see things go wrong, and we're seeing, unfortunately, more and more cases where things are going wrong. We saw the case of Abdelaziz, the chief suspect in this grotesque chemical attack, converted to Christianity. Liverpool suicide bomber who blew up that taxi outside the women's wing, the maternity ward. converted to Christianity. When we see incidents like this, Lee, do you think there's a case to be made that these bleeding hearts that help in this process, they've got blood on their hands?
Oh, of course they have. I mean, these people are, you know, they're seeing the world through rose-tinted glasses, thinking that every single young man that arrives in the back of a lorry or on a boat are God-fearing people that's fleeing war or persecution, but they're not, Martin. I mean, from day one, I have said, because I spoke to these young men in the camps, they are economic migrants, and the reason we were getting so many Albanians over at one time, they were coming on small boats, Martin, paying up to £5,000, I think it is, to get here from Albania, when they could have got on a Wizz Air flight for 28 quid from Tirana straight into Luton. Now, there's a reason they were coming on small boats, is because they didn't want to produce their passport or any documents or any visa, because at that point we know who they are, where they're from, and what they've been up to in the past.
Yeah. When you talked earlier, a minute ago, about you see the country slipping away.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? You care to elaborate? A lot of people say the same thing, but
So I was speaking to people at the weekend, and one person suggested to me that we're sort of giving the country away. And when you think about it, I found it very hard to disagree with that person because, like I said, there's thousands of people coming in, both legally and illegally, from different cultures. And the ones that are coming on the small boats especially are coming from cultures where they don't respect our way of life. They don't even like our way of life. You know, they certainly don't respect the way we treat our women and our children and everything else that goes in this great society of ours. And slowly but surely, people are waking up in this country and think to themselves, my goodness, what we're doing, this is not the country I was brought up in. And I'm quite nostalgic, Martin. I think to my childhood in the 70s in Ashfield, growing up, and I like that place. You know, it got its problems, got a little bit of poverty and stuff like that. But I like that place. I like that place, you know, which respected our history, which respected our culture, that sat up and stood up, and sang the national anthem and waved the flag, you know, during celebrations, stuff like that. I just feel, and I'm sure there's many people around the country feel exactly the same way as me, that I want to bring that back.
A lot of people say, of course, mass legal and illegal migration has happened on the Conservative Party's watch.
It has. It's happened on everybody's watch. There's no excuse for any political party in this country. You know, in election after election, we keep saying we're going to control immigration, and we don't. You know, and some people over there will say, well, it's good for the economy. It's not good for the economy, Martin. You know, if you bring more people in, yes, we'll make more stuff. But I always taught, you know, basic economics is the way that you become more productive as a business and ultimately a country is if you produce more with less people. That's just simple. That's quite basic. And tell that to the people in Ashfield who's waiting for a doctor's appointment or a dental appointment, or has just had that knee operation cancelled for the second time. They won't agree with that.
Do you think part of the problem, Lee, is this kind of divorce from reality that a lot of senior parliamentarians, lawyers might have? For example, chances are they don't live in an area where they can't get a GP appointment, they can't get a dentist appointment, a school place, and it's not suppressing their wages if they're a plasterer or a bricklayer. Yeah. There's a huge disconnect between the average working class person out there and the people running the country.
It's the same as we just spoke about, Martin, with the Archbishop of Canterbury. They do not live in the real world. I work in that place over there, and I'm sure, you know, that a lot of them MPs in there, of all parties, don't live in the real world. They don't live on that terrace street in Ashfield. They don't see the people queuing up at the doctors in the morning or at the chemist. They don't see the people struggling, you know, to get their children into the right school. They don't see the people, you know, struggling to get that doctor's appointment. They don't see all these things, you know. They don't see the problems we've got with local social services and young people's service and stuff like that, because it's okay for such as me, and I'm sure it's okay for you, we're on a decent salary, get a decent wage. You know, if I can't get a dental appointment, I can go to a private dentist, you know. If I've got something, an emergency operation I need, I could probably afford to have it done with the money I've got, you know, tucked away, because I earn decent money. But the vast majority of the constituents in my area aren't fortunate like that. So this is... Who lies awake at night worrying to pay the gas bill or the electric bill, or can they afford to put 20 quid's worth of diesel in the car? It's not them over there, it's the people that live on my street.
Now, Lee, to finish, if we don't get a grip on this situation of uncontrolled immigration, no right to deport, a Labour Party coming, if we don't get a grip on the situation, you mentioned about our country changing, where do you think the country is heading?
Well, this is the problem, you see. As bad as it is at the moment, Martin, and it is bad, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, if the Labour Party do get in, they've already made some silly announcements recently about not deporting people who appear to be under the age of 18. Now, we've seen this before with some of these dodgy asylum seekers. They've got beards down here, no teeth, and bald, and they're claiming to be 15-year-old. Absolute nonsense, and that has to go through some sort of process. So I do fear for the country a lot under Labour government. Like I say, we've not been brilliant at it, but we've got policies in place. Hopefully the Rwanda scheme will work. You know, that place all the time has been against us. The House of Lords now is sort of messing about with the Rwanda bill. We've got to do it, Martin, for the sake of this country and the sake of our children.
OK, Lee Anderson, Conservative MP for Ashfield, thank you with your forthright opinions as ever. We'll have lots more on that story at 5 o'clock. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Now it's time for the Great British Giveaway, and you really could be our next winner with 18 grand in cold, hard cash. Fancy a chance of grabbing that? Well, here's all the details that you need to enter.
This is your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash. That's like having an extra £1,500 each month for the next year. And if you're thinking, I'd never win something like that, listen to the moment we told Phil from West Yorkshire he'd won our last Great British Giveaway.
Phil, I've got some really good news for you. You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
You're joking. That's brilliant news.
For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Now, police are investigating reports of violence at the historic RAF base at Scampton. Of course, that's home to the legendary Dambusters, which is set to house up to 2,000 migrants. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basi-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop? If the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones, I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone,
say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 4:23. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, we've got some breaking news for you now. Detectives hunting for Alkali attack suspect Abdul Azidi have arrested and bailed a 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. Investigators are trawling through hundreds of hours of CCTV and have tracked Azidi's movements on the Tube network via his bank card, with the latest sighting now on Southwark Bridge at 9:50 p.m. on Wednesday. The last confirmed time that he used his bank card was on Wednesday. Police have said counter-terrorism officers are helping sift through CCTV as part of this massive manhunt following the horrific attack in Clapham, South London. Just to repeat, that's breaking news. Police have made an arrest in the manhunt for Abdul Azidi. They've arrested and bailed a 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. Investigators are going through hundreds of hours of CCTV to try and piece this together. So Azidi still at large, but an accomplice, it appears, has been arrested. Now, police are investigating reports of violence at an historic RAF airbase that's set to house up to 2,000 migrants. Officers from Lincolnshire Police attended RAF Scampton in the early hours of Sunday morning. The site was the home of the Dambusters in World War II, of course, and the local council is fighting plans to move migrants there from April. Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis is at RAF Scampton. Will, welcome to the show. A story that's captivated GB News viewers since the beginning. What's the latest?
Yes, well, at the centre of the Scampton story, it is the Home Office trying to move asylum seekers into the historic airbase. And despite developments over the last year, often the news is incidents around the periphery that are taking the spotlight. In particular, things like antisocial behaviour, incidents including arrests in the past, and even one incident that regarded a petrol bomb being found. But over the weekend, Lincolnshire Police says they are now investigating reports of assault at a number of protester sites around the airbase. It's important to say that RAF Scampton has attracted a lot of attention from a lot of different groups, some that live here close by, just outside the gates, others groups from around the country, and all have come here for different reasons, and at times there has been friction between them. But these latest allegations claim that masked people came in the middle of the night and assaulted a number of people in some incidents, quite simply pushing people, telling them to leave a particular campsite right in front of the gates of Scampton. In other incidents, accusations of full-on assault where people have been punched. Now, one of the people who says that she and her husband Paul were assaulted was Sarah Carter, who is one of the original founders of the Save Our Scampton campaign and a prominent voice in the campaign around Scampton.
Well, there were so many people there that I can only remember one of them wearing a bandana across their face. I can't remember seeing masks, but again, 12 people all over the place. When you're in a state of panic, it's hard to take everything in. I did recognise faces, and the police are aware of those people, who they are. But yeah, they decided to come in, didn't even sort of nicely ask, you know, this is ours, can you leave? You know, 12 against 2, yeah, we're not going to stick around. But they didn't even give us a chance to have the conversation. One of the guys just decided he was going to sort of launch Paul onto the floor across the top of a chair. Then he managed to get up and he threw him into like this big wooden box that we had that it was full of fence panels with nails in that we just chopped up for the wood for the fire. put him in there, and that's where he's got most of his injuries from, being sort of put in there. He managed to get away, get to his car. They tried to get into his car, but they then sort of left him alone. But in the meantime, I sort of had a bit of a scuffle, lost my body cam in the process. Didn't want them to take or damage my phone, which is what they were trying to get. So I'm not quite sure. I ended up on the floor in the sort of trying to get away from them.
Well, Lincolnshire Police says that they have not yet made any arrest in relation to Sarah's particular incident, but they are investigating those reports. They're asking anybody who may have dash cam footage and may have been travelling along the road where RAF Scampton is, the A15, if they do have anything from over the weekend, particularly around Saturday night and Sunday, particularly in the small hours between those 2 days at the weekend, as well as across Sunday when more allegations of assault have happened. They're asking those people to send in footage. As I mentioned, there are a number of protest groups with different ambitions around what they think should happen here at RAF Scampton, and the police are reminding those people and asking them to treat each other respectfully, whether that's their own personal safety and well-being, as well as their property and the space that they are using. It's important, I suppose, to remind you of what is happening with the RAF base, RAF Scampton. Back in the late part of last year, a judicial review was unsuccessful. It is expected that asylum seekers will be moving into RAF Scampton in as early as April. West Lindsey District Council is going to appeal that decision, and we can expect that there will be lots more news around what will happen here if asylum seekers will ever move into RAF Scampton.
Okay, Will Hollis, thanks for that update live from RAF Scampton. Just want to say Sarah Carter and those locals who've been camped at that site for many, many weeks now throughout very, very cold weather have been protesting peacefully, respectfully. They've been causing no trouble. We've been following the story on GB News for many, many, many weeks. And now it appears the police reporting there and Sarah directly to GB News. Masked intruders, assailants from outside the area, they claim, assaulting them. Very, very serious situation if locals peacefully protesting or being harangued by people wearing masks from outside the area. That's a story we'll be sure to keep all across in this hour across GB News for the rest of the day. Let's hope the police investigate and have a swift resolution of justice on that front. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. In a few minutes, I'll have the latest on the hunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi, as we said, after detectives hunting for him have arrested and bailed a 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. But first, your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
So the headlines this hour, then let's bring you some more on those latest developments in the hunt for Abdul Azadi. The Met Police saying that a 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. He's been since released on bail this afternoon. We are expecting new footage to be released shortly of Azadi walking across Southwark Bridge in London just before 10 o'clock on Wednesday evening. Police are also telling us they are now tracking his bank card, but it hasn't been used since Wednesday evening. And we understand the focus of the search is still very much on the area south of London, South London itself. Police still warning those helping Abdul Azadi will face arrest themselves, and they've continued to appeal for the public's help in bringing him in. Meanwhile, Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill says more money's needed for public services in Northern Ireland. It comes after a meeting with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, to discuss Stormont's finances, where power sharing has now returned. However, the Prime Minister says the new £3.3 billion funding deal is already significant and generous. And the Defence Secretary says the UK will, if necessary, not hesitate to respond once again if the Houthis strike again in self-defence. The Prime Minister earlier said their illegal campaign in the Red Sea is having economic consequences. Meanwhile, the White House says the US plan to launch more strikes at Iranian-backed groups in the Middle East is coming in the next few days, but rebel leaders say the latest UK-US airstrikes won't stop them from targeting ships. And here in the UK, a whole day of snow could be on the way, with a yellow weather warning issued for large parts of England and Wales for later this week. The Met Office saying winter weather could lead to disruption, with power cuts and travel delays. The warning runs from 3 a.m. Thursday to the same time on Friday morning, and it involves stretches from Cumbria and the Scottish border town down to Cambridgeshire and the Midlands in England. All of northern and central Wales also included in that warning. Further detail on all that by going to gbnews.com, or you can sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
A quick snapshot for you of today's markets, and the pound buying $1.2527 and €1.1677. The price of gold is £1,612.41 an ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,611 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, in a few minutes, we'll head to New Scotland Yard on the latest on the hunt for chemical suspect Abdulazidi, after detectives hunting for him have arrested and bailed a 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. Don't go anywhere. We'll have all the latest on GB News, and I'm Martin Daubney on Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses, can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now to the hunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi, which has entered its 5th day now. And police are offering a £20,000 reward to anyone who can help them find Azidi. Last Wednesday, a 31-year-old woman and her 2 daughters were attacked in Clapham. And the woman, who suffered potentially life-changing injuries, was known to Azidi and remains in hospital in a critical but stable condition. As we brought you a short while ago, detectives hunting for alkali attack suspect Abdul Azidi have now arrested and bailed a 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. Well, our reporter Ray Addison is outside New Scotland Yard. Ray, the story is developing. What's all the latest?
Well, police here telling us that the focus of their search for Azidi is now most firmly on South London. They're going to be releasing a new image imminently, which was taken from CCTV footage of Azidi walking in the Southwark Bridge area at around 9:50 p.m. on Wednesday night. Now, they say they've got hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV footage to go through and over 200 calls as well to the dedicated hotline, which is being manned 24 hours a day. And that, they say, is the reason for the slight delay in releasing some of these images. But yes, in the early hours of this morning, around 12:45 a.m., a 22-year-old man, as you were saying, Martin, was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. They believe that the reason they arrested him was on suspicion of assisting Azidi after the offence. He was taken to a South London police station, but this afternoon he was released on bail. Police say they're tracking Azidi's bank card, which he was using as he negotiated his way through the London Tube network. That hasn't been used since Wednesday evening, we're told, and they believe that that indicates one of two things. Either he could have come to some form of harm, or he has found somebody who can shelter him and look after him, and he therefore hasn't been out and about since Wednesday. Now, they've also recovered his mobile phone. They took that from the vehicle that he'd been driving that Wednesday night, which was involved in a collision. They said it was extremely difficult to get the mobile phone out of that vehicle because of the corrosive material that was believed to be in the car. However, now they've retrieved that phone. Analysis of it is underway at the moment. And they've also analysing the mother's phone too. They're confirming she does have life-changing injuries and she most likely has lost the sight in her right eye.
OK, thank you, Ray Addison, for that update live from New Scotland Yard. Now, moving on, Abdul Azidi has been missing for 5 days now. So how do the police go about catching him in a major manhunt of this nature? Well, I'm joined now by former Metropolitan Police Senior Investigating Officer Peter Kirkham. Peter, welcome to the show. So I don't know how much you heard of that there, Peter, but fresh information pouring in. Azidi's bank card now not been used since Wednesday. The police have his mobile phone. The last CCTV imagery also appears to be from Southwark Bridge in London, round about the same time, just before 10 o'clock on Wednesday. Since then, he's gone totally off-grid. What with that and the introduction of a £20,000 cash reward, Peter Kirkham, what does that say to you about the nature and the situation of this massive manhunt now?
Good evening. One of two things, really. Either he is hunkered down somewhere, in which case somebody will be needing to support him, providing food, water, providing everything else that goes with life, maybe medical attention or, some sort of medical aid for his injury to his face, or he's come to some harm, either at his own hands or some other way. I suspect the former rather than the latter. There is also a third possibility, but I think everything suggesting this hasn't happened, is that he might have fled the UK. So I think the Met are tightening the net, really, around southeast London. That seems to be where everything is indicated. They've got the mobile phone that they can now work with. They will steadily be building up a list of associates, and we've heard that one person has been arrested and bailed on suspicion of assisting him. That no doubt will lead to other lines of inquiry and other addresses and other names and other phone numbers and other vehicle details, all of which they can then pursue and steadily look for things that are all pointing together into the same place. It's tightening, and I'd be very surprised if he remains at large for very much longer.
Because, Peter, a lot of people are scratching their heads and asking the very reasonable questions. You know, I can't drive my car in London without getting a ticket if I turn down the wrong street. It seems that we're all being tracked and traced wherever we go. How can a dangerous felon of this nature simply vanish?
If he was in a car, then that would be a very simple matter to track that vehicle, and it would pop up on cameras where ANPR technology is being used all over the place. And that is relatively straightforward to do. But of course, we don't wear a number plate. Facial recognition technology isn't that good, especially in sort of moving situations like public crowd scenes, where people are all different angles and the lighting's not the best and people get in the way of each other and such like. So facial recognition isn't really used to any great extent, certainly not across, large swathes of public space. And yes, there's lots of CCTV cameras, but what they're not doing is tracking individuals. There's nobody watching the majority of them from the majority of the time, let alone being able to identify individuals within that. The police have said that they're going through CCTV. Yes, they'll have seized a lot, and as they get more and more focused in their inquiries and the trail is sort of taking them in particular directions, they'll be gathering more and more CCTV, but then they've got to watch it. And that is not a quick task. You need numerous officers, you need sets of kit that you can watch it on, decode it and watch it on. And if you want it done properly, so you're pretty sure he's not on it, then it needs to take its time. And, you can't really watch it in real time when you're looking for an individual. It's got to be slowed down. Okay, Peter Kirkham, former Metropolitan Police Senior Investigating Officer, thank you for the latest. Your expert opinion on the continuing manhunt for Abdul Azidi. Now, you're watching and listening to GB News, and coming up, we'll be discussing the locals in Farnborough, 91% of whom oppose a local plan to house migrants in a block of flats, and we'll speak to a local next for his thoughts. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Are they trying to make it better, or are they trying to make it slower? A lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the crossings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's a kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
It's interesting they can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Welcome back. It's 4:49 now. Prince William is ready to return to work after Princess Catherine was discharged from hospital last week. And joining me now to discuss this is our royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, fantastic news.
It is very good news. We're going to have another senior member of the royal family back in action. So it's all taking place on Wednesday. He's going to be conducting an investiture at Windsor Castle, of course, very close to Adelaide Cottage, where he has been caring for his wife Catherine and, of course, their 3 young children as she continues to recover from abdominal surgery. And then in the evening, he's attending one of his patronage's fundraising galas for London Air Ambulance. He became patron in March 2020, helped celebrate their 30th anniversaries the year before that. And of course, it's a cause very close to Prince William's heart, because for years he actually flew as a pilot for East Anglia Air Ambulance. So yeah, good news all around.
Excellent. And there's another rumour flying around about Princess Kate.
Yeah, which I have been told by a very reliable source is totally ridiculous. But there were rumours in international media that the Princess of Wales was quite ill in a coma. I've been told we do not need to worry. That is completely unfounded. She is recovering as we expected, and we'll see her at Easter.
Two great good news stories there. Thank you very much, Cameron Walker, for that quick update. Now let's bring you a big update on a story that we've been covering from the beginning on this show over the last few weeks, and that's the Home Office's plan to house more than 300 asylum seekers in a brand new block of luxury flats in Farnborough. Locals have been protesting about the scheme over the last few weeks, and now some fresh news. A massive 91% of people have replied to a survey launched by the local MP to say they are dead against the plan. Well, I can now speak with a local resident, Jez Stocking. Jez, welcome to the show.
Hi, Martin.
Jez, thanks for joining us, mate. So 91% of locals agree with you. So what's the latest on site? Are they still continuing to fit the site out to move people in? Or for now, as the Home Office promised and the local council in Rushmore, have things been paused?
Well, I think we've gone past the end of January deadline that they said they were going to move them in by. But it seems like stuff is still being moved in on a daily basis. Over the weekend, the security lights that made it look like a prison camp again went on. One of our protesters lives in the flats opposite, and she couldn't get to sleep and I think had to move out of the flat for the weekend. So it's obvious that things are still going on. They seem to have upped the security there as well. There seems to be more security guards. So, yeah, I think things are still progressing to maybe move the migrants into the flats fairly soon.
And Jez, you've been having a series of peaceful protests over the past few weekends. Seem to be very well attended. I hear 150 people were in attendance at one of them, and it seems that the community is massively on your side.
Well, 91% is a huge figure, isn't it? In any poll, if you get 91%, you're talking almost a majority of people. That survey was carried out by the local MP, Leo Doherty. Yes, we had 150, I think it was 2 weekends ago. Our next protest is this Saturday. We hope to get more. Many people seem to be talking to me saying that we're doing the right thing and we just need them to join the protest, not suffer with any fear. We've had no counter-protests as of yet, which at these sort of demonstrations, I think you normally do get a counter-protest, but maybe the locals are full on for this.
Yeah, and Jez, of course, we're seeing stories about asylum seekers going on to commit crimes. And of course, these are the kinds of very real fears that residents in Farnborough have about who may be allowed into the block there.
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear. You chat to people, they are frightened. You know, I mean, with this chemical attack the last week, it's horrific. And we don't want that sort of thing going on in Farnborough. Farnborough has enough of its own problems with petty crime, but we don't seem to have major crime, but we don't want any of that type of thing in Farnborough. I've been talking to other people that are trying to stop similar things in their own town. No to North Eye. They carried out a similar survey, and again, it was 90% of local residents didn't want the migrants moving into their area.
Well, Jez, we've been doing our bit on GB News to shine a light on this story all the way along, and it seems that coming together as a community and peacefully and getting your local politician and council on board so far seems to be working, Jez.
Peaceful is the word we come with. We've got women, children, probably 80% are men, but I think women maybe they're not into demonstrating as much as men, but we encourage this Saturday more women to come out. Bring your children, even bring your dogs for a little walk. You know, just demonstrate, just show that the people of Rushmore believe that this is the wrong thing to do. I mean, everybody else, all the people you speak to want to hold these demonstrations and stop these migrants moving in. Apart from it seems to be local councillors. I mean, we emailed 39 local councillors, and only 5 of them bothered to actually even reply to us. Okay. And 3 of those were all for the migrants being housed.
Okay,
so,
Jez Stocking, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. That's People Power coming into force. Now, coming up, we'll be covering the abuse of the asylum system as 40 migrants on the Bibby Stockholm miraculously convert to Christianity. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Many of us will see a bit of rain at times through the next few days, but as we see something colder later on in the week, there's also the risk of some snow. For the time being, we have a frontal system still lingering across parts of Scotland. This has already brought a fair amount of rain so far today and will continue to do so as we head into this evening. But the rain pushes its way southwards overnight into southern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later northern England. To the north of this, we will see some clear skies, but also a scattering of showers and some colder air, so watch out for the risk of some sleet, some snow and also some icy patches tomorrow morning. A milder start though further south, many places staying in double figures overnight, though it is going to be rather cloudy with a few spots of rain. As we go through tomorrow, that rain band then will continue to edge a bit further southwards, pushing into more central parts of England and also Wales, staying drier towards the south, though a largely cloudy day here. Any sunshine will be pretty limited. A greater chance of seeing some sunny skies further north of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a scattering of wintry showers because we have colder air here, temperatures getting into mid-single figures at best. Further south though, highs around 14 Celsius. As we go later in the week, we're likely to see a weather system pushing its way up from the south, hitting colder air, and so that could bring some significant snow, particularly to central parts as we go through Thursday. Bit of uncertainty as to the detail as to exactly when and where we will see the snow, but it does look like things will be colder for many of us, but milder in the south. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
We've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So, of course, feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually, I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, it's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. In a few minutes I'll be joined by the Conservative MP and Deputy Chair of the party, Rachel McLean. She's just landed right here now, but before that, we'll cover the abuse of the asylum system as 40 migrants on the Bibby Stockholm barge are converting as if by a miracle to Christianity in a bid to be given asylum. And there's reaction to the worrying news that hundreds of firearms officers have quit the Metropolitan Police since one of their colleagues was charged with murder. And Rishi Sunak's been in Northern Ireland today, but next Monday he'll be live on GB News.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
Now, isn't that the reason that GB News was launched in the first place? Putting questions to the Prime Minister directly, you, the people, holding the powerful to account. And on that point, what would you like to ask the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, next Monday evening? Email me your questions, gbviews@gbnews.com. I'll look through them and pick some of the best and try and get them in the pot so you can hold Rishi Sunak to account. But before that, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon to you. Let's just start this bulletin with some breaking news we're hearing concerning the stabbings last week in Bristol. I can tell you a 14-year-old has been charged with the murder of 2 teenagers in Bristol last week. He's the 7th person to be charged in connection with the deaths of 15-year-old Mason Wrist and 16-year-old Max Dixon. They were stabbed in the Knoll West area south of the city last weekend. Police just announcing that new arrest within the last 15 minutes. Well, in other news today, Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill says more money is needed for public services in Northern Ireland. It comes after meeting with Rishi Sunak to discuss Stormont's finances, where power sharing has now returned. However, speaking at a visit to a primary school in Northern Ireland, the Prime Minister said the new £3.3 billion funding deal is already significant and generous.
I had very constructive meetings today with all political leaders in Stormont and the new executive, and the funding package that we put on the table before Christmas I think has been widely recognised as being significant and generous, £3.3 billion, a focus on long-term sustainability, ensuring that Northern Ireland has the funding it needs, not just for today to deal with the immediate challenges, but is on a path towards being able to provide high-quality public services into the future, because that's what we want, brighter future for the children that I've been spending time with at this school here this morning.
And speaking at a news conference in Stormont, the Irish Premier Leo Varadkar pledged he'd do everything he could to help the Northern Ireland executive be successful.
A lot of everyday issues that need attention here in Northern Ireland, and I know they're going to work very hard on that. We're keen to get North-South cooperation going again, have a meeting of the NSMC in the next couple of weeks, and focus on some of that practical cooperation that works well for everyone on the island. So very keen to work with the new executive, and looking forward to doing that.
Now, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK will, if necessary, not hesitate to respond again against the Houthis in self-defence. The Prime Minister earlier said their illegal campaign in the Red Sea is having economic consequences. And in the United States, the White House says the US plan to launch more strikes at Iranian-backed groups in the Middle East will happen in the coming days. But rebel leaders say the latest UK-US airstrikes won't stop them from targeting commercial shipping. Grant Shapps updated the Commons on the escalation in the Red Sea earlier.
Mr. Speaker, military action can only be one element in our efforts to confront these global challenges, and military action is indeed the very last resort. It would be far better if the Houthis simply stopped their attacks.
Grant Shapps. Well, let's bring you some latest developments on the hunt for the Afghan asylum seeker Abdul Azidi. The Metropolitan Police is saying that a 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. He's since been released on bail this afternoon. The Mets also said it's recovered Abdul Azizi's mobile phone, is in focusing now the search in South London, and additionally a £20,000 reward is being offered for any information that could lead to his arrest after last week's attack injured a mother and hurt her 2 young children. Police have warned that those helping Azidi will face arrest and have called upon the public for greater help. Meanwhile, 40 asylum seekers on the Bibby Stockholm barge have reportedly converted to Christianity, raising concerns that migrants are claiming to change their religion in order to stay in the UK. It's reported 1 in 7 of the 300 migrants on board the vessel are attending local churches, fueling concerns about the role churches may be playing in asylum claims. The Transport Minister, Hugh Merriman, says the government is, though, making good progress to reduce the number of illegal migrants crossing into the UK.
There's action that's on the new laws that we need, and there's also action on reducing the amount of cases that are outstanding. And we've had a huge number that have been reduced in the last year. We've also reduced the number of illegal migrants crossing by 36% in a year as well. So there's progress, but it actually tells us that we need to continue to clamp down, both using powers from Parliament and also using the resources we have to get those numbers reduced.
Merriman. Now, an asylum seeker has been sentenced to 18 months in jail after a woman fell overboard and drowned while he was piloting a boat with over 70 illegal migrants on board. The 22-year-old continued the journey across the English Channel until the boat was intercepted by Border Force. He told officers that he'd left Sudan in 2021 and made his way to France. And despite initially denying any other charges, he later pleaded guilty to facilitating illegal migration. The National Crime Agency said today's sentencing shows their commitment to holding people to account for putting lives at risk. Now, a whole day of snow could be on the way, with a yellow weather warning issued for large parts of England and Wales for later this week. The Met Office saying the winter weather could lead to disruption with power cuts and possible travel delays. The warning runs from 3 a.m. Thursday to the same time Friday, and it stretches from Cumbria and the Scottish borders down to Cambridgeshire and the Midlands, and all of central Wales and northern Wales is included in the warning as well. For the latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now we start with the abuse of our asylum system by migrants who are, as if by magic, claiming to be Christian just to stay in the country. 40 asylum seekers on the Bibby Stockholm are converting to Christianity, and that's almost 1 in 7 of all migrants on that barge. And this comes, of course, after Abdul Azidi, who's the main suspect in last week's chemical attack case, was given asylum on the basis that he too had converted to Christian and therefore could not be returned to Afghanistan. Well, to join this topic, I'm now joined in the studio in Westminster by the Conservative MP for Redditch and the Deputy Chair of the party, Rachel McLean. Rachel, thank you for joining us
Pleasure.
On GB News. A lot of people are starting to look at this and think there's something going on here. It can't be coincidence, can it, Rachel, that so many people who are seeking asylum suddenly seem to be seeing the light from above and deciding to convert to Christianity. The big question is this a joined-up, orchestrated industry?
I think it's absolutely right, Martin, that people are looking at this and they're asking questions, and they're right to do so. And I want to be clear, I don't blame any individual migrant for doing absolutely everything they can to stay in our country, because our country is a wonderful place. We know that people want to come here because of our way of life and the things that we hold dear, which is all the more important, in my view, that we protect our borders and we have control over migration. But when it comes to this issue of religious conversion, I think it is a really hard one, because I don't think it's actually fair on those faith leaders, those people, those ministers and vicars and so on, who have to make a decision like that, because they're just not in the position to be able to look at all the facts in the round. And I think this whole issue of conversion, the faith conversion and the links to the asylum system really does need to be looked at again.
And what would that look like? Because does this filter from the top? We have Justin Welby, the head of the Church of England, who seems to believe that we should place all of our belief in asylum seekers, and that may come at a cost to the British public, as we've seen with Abdul Azidi, as we've seen with the Liverpool suicide bomber, both of whom converted to Christianity.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a Christian. I'm a member of the Christian faith. I'm a member of my local church. And Christians, as a group, have a huge variety of views on this. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has got his own views, and he is advancing a particular agenda.
He sets the tone.
He does. He of course, is leading, and his comments are very, very influential, and he's made them in a number of forums. I don't think that is the right way to approach the issue, because unfortunately what happens then is that not only is he damaging the institution of our own democracy and our asylum system, but also I think it damages the fabric of the institution of the Church of England, because there are lots and lots of Christians, and I don't claim to speak for all Christians at all, but there are Christians who don't think that this is the right way to go about it. And if you really step back for a moment, this is a really hard problem. How can you look into someone's heart? I mean, Christianity is a private, personal thing. You profess your faith to God, and only God knows what you really believe. And I think it's something that, because people are being, or they think, or they're trying to be kind and compassionate, of course they are, and demonstrate Christian love, it is something that unfortunately can lead to loopholes in the system.
A lot of people, Rachel, are starting to think, for right or for wrong, that the church, the Home Office, charities that bring asylum seekers or facilitate their arrival to Britain, and those that prevent their removal from Britain, universities, even the RNLI, bringing people ashore, are working contrary to the beliefs of the government and of the electorate.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. Across the board, all those institutions that you've mentioned have a view that migration is an unalloyed good. And it may be the case that there are many, many migrants who come to do essential jobs and so on, and none of us have any animus towards those individuals who are fleeing the desperate situations. But of course, when it adds up to the numbers that we see, and when we see abuses, and when we also see criminals who we can't deport back to their own country, people then start to question it. I'm holding a debate in the House of Commons on Wednesday about deportation of foreign national offenders, and I'll be questioning the ministers and the government. Now, we have, as a Conservative government, introduced some very, very tough legislation, and we've made some progress in terms of how we can deport people and get them out of the country. And I have to say, Martin, at every single stage, you've seen the people that have opposed us. It's been the Labour Party, it's been the charities, it's been the church leaders. And actually, they are not speaking for the ordinary people in this country who just look at this and think, what on earth is going on? These people have committed crimes. They shouldn't be here.
And yet we still haven't seen a single flight leave for Rwanda. Not a single person's been deported that way. People, I think, Rachel, are really starting to lose faith in our ability to deport anybody from this country, no matter how heinous their crimes.
Well, we have seen some deportation flights for some of these other countries. And, of course, we've seen quite a good and robust returns agreement with Albania, which has dealt with quite a lot of people who've come here through the small boat and the lorry route. Last time I was in your studio, we were talking about the Rwanda plan, and that has now gone through Parliament. So, look, let's see where we get to with that. We need that deterrent. I strongly believe that we need to have that, and it will have an impact when it comes in. But I think even in the meantime, ahead of the Rwanda thing, we've got people who are already here. And they shouldn't be here. They've committed crimes. They are violent people. Some of them are rapists. Some of them are paedophiles. And while we are having some success in getting some of them out, we need, in my view, to accelerate that process. Because, after all, let's not forget, we need the prison places for our own population. We need to make sure that we've got those deterrents and we keep the public safe.
Excellent. As ever, Rachel McGinn, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. MP for Redditch and the party Deputy Chair. And please come back and tell us how that debate carried on, because I think people are starting to lose a bit of faith. So let's get you back in to see how that went on. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Always a pleasure. Now you get lots more on the migrants who are converting to Christianity on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all the brilliant analysis that you've come to expect from GB News. Now to the hunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi has taken a new twist in this past hour, because police have confirmed that a 22-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender in the early hours of this morning. Police have also said that they are continuing to track Azidi's bank card, which hasn't been used since Wednesday evening. The search continues for the suspect, who is believed to be hiding somewhere in South London. Our reporter Ray Addison is live. He's outside New Scotland Yard and he joins us on the show now. Ray, a huge amount of fresh information has come out in the past hour. Bring us up to speed, please.
Hundreds of specialist officers, Martin, are scouring hundreds of hours of CCTV footage after over 200 calls to the emergency number to report sightings, suspected sightings of Azidi as this manhunt continues. As you were saying, though, the focus of this investigation really is the South London area. Why? Because Azidi was spotted at 9:50 on Wednesday evening crossing Southwark Bridge. That's the last known sighting of him. There's going to be a new image released of him, which police will be hoping very much will jog the memories of anyone who may have been in that area and then saw where he went after that point. Now, in the early hours of this morning at around 12:45 a.m., a 22-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. And police stressing that they believed at the time that this man may have assisted Azidi after the offence, not in the preparation of any offence. Now, he was taken to a South London police station, but he was bailed this afternoon. Police say that they, as you were saying, have been tracking Azidi's bank card. He was using that as he went through the rail network, the underground network, and it hasn't been used since Wednesday evening. Police say there could be two reasons for that. Either he's come to some form of harm, or he's found shelter with somebody who is hiding him away and perhaps helping him with medical treatment. The force, the Met, has also recovered Azidi's mobile phone and the phone of the 31-year-old woman who was injured in that attack on Wednesday night. They say they're analysing both phones, Azidi's to try and find potential contacts, but hers as well, to try and figure out what kind of relationship Azidi may have had to that woman. Now, she remains in a sedated, critical but stable condition, and they do say she's got serious injuries which she will have for the rest of her life. Particularly, they suspect that she may have lost the sight in her right eye. They've been unable to speak to her because she is so poorly at the moment, and so they're unable to confirm if Azidi was in some form of relationship with this woman, but they have stressed that they do not believe that he is the children's father. So this manhunt is continuing at considerable pace, hundreds of specialist officers, and they do say it's their belief that someone in the community knows where he is, and they're urging them to come forward.
Thank you for that update. That's Ray Addison live at New Scotland Yard with all the latest on the increased manhunt for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. Now, what would you do with an extra £1,500 each month for an entire year? Well, you could win that in our great British giveaways. 18 grand in cold, hard cash is up for grabs, and here's how you could make all of that cash yours.
There's an incredible £18,000 in cash to be won in the latest Great British Giveaway. Totally tax-free cash that you could do whatever you like with. That works out to be an extra £1,500 to play with each month for a whole year. Money to make each month just that little bit better. You could put it towards monthly treats, save it for a rainy day, or just use it to take the pressure off in 2024. For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Now, a Jewish man has received death threats and has seen a Muslim give him a Hitler salute at Speaker's Corner. We'll have him in the studio shortly to discuss this appalling incident. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it, as you know, Eamon. You can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category is just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom.
And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
offensive. You were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know?
There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
Welcome back. It's 5:23. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, later this hour, I'll discuss the comments from Northern Ireland's new First Minister, who says there could be a vote on a united Ireland within the next 10 years. Now, a warning that what we're about to show you contains some footage that may well offend you. It certainly offended me. We've often talked about the huge increase in anti-Semitism since the October the 7th attacks in Israel. And now a Muslim man has been filmed giving Hitler salutes to a Jewish man at Speaker's Corner, as you can see on screen there. The incident happened in front of Joseph Cohen from the Israel Advocacy Movement, and Joseph also clashed with a man who said he would burn him. A warning to our viewers and listeners that the video you're about to see does contain mentions of religiously motivated violence.
Flicking your lighter before, telling me you were going to burn my beard?
No, not now. When we get Palestine, I will do it for you.
Yeah, you won't?
Yeah, no, not now. When we get Palestine, inshallah,
you won't
in the
do
future,
it now and you won't do it then.
I'm going to burn you from the bottom to the top when we get to Palestine. You know why?
You don't need to get to Palestine, you can do it now.
Wait, because you know, when you go to Palestine, you patronize my people, you kick them away from their homes, you made them asylum on all around the world, bro.
So watch this, people, watch this. There are 2 million Arabs living in Israel as Israeli citizens with full equality. How many Jews in Libya?
We don't have.
And he has the audacity to talk about kicking people out.
Of course!
He's right all the Jews
You're
out
not
of
allowed in Libya. You come Libya, I'm going to cook you like a macarona.
And listen to the fanatics laughing. Listen to them.
Like
this is why we can't live under them. This is why we need a state. Pay attention, Jews. Pay attention.
I mean, it utterly makes me despair. Joseph Cohen now joins me in the studio. Joseph, how is this allowed to happen on British streets? And in particular, that's at Speaker's Corner. Speaker's Corner, globally, historically recognised as a place of free speech. That's not free speech. That's direct racism against Jewish people.
It's not just racism, it's inciting violence. And one of the most disturbing things about both of those clips actually wasn't what's being said. It was the reaction to what's being said. There are dozens of people there. Not one person spoke out. Not one person, other than myself, even bothered to respond in a assertive way. It's a harrowing place for Jews a terrifying place for Jews to find themselves, where you can have such violent anti-Semitism and absolutely nobody says a thing. They turn away.
And Joseph, not only that, there have been serious attacks at Speaker's Corner. Hatun Tash, a Christian preacher, was threatened with murder by an individual who converted to Islam, was paying £5,000 for weapons to go and do an attempt at murder. A woman in a Charlie Hebdo T-shirt was slashed at Speaker's Corner by a Muslim assailant in July 2021. What's happening there? Who are these people? What do they want?
So they're extremists, and the overwhelming majority of them actually weren't born in this country. They were born in countries where, unfortunately, there is real anti-Semitism. The ADL has put out polls in places like Egypt, which is where the gentleman who was throwing up Nazi salutes came from, in Libya, which is where the second gentleman was from, where they found respondents overwhelmingly held anti-Semitic positions, and they're coming to the UK and they're introducing very, very dangerous ideologies to people who've never been exposed to such hatred.
So, Joseph, that individual, and I'm being charitable with that word there, threatened to burn you. Yeah. And the other one was doing Heil Hitler salutes. Yeah. In the modern era, in 2024, are the police following this up?
So the police have never got in touch with me over any of these videos. It's very clear they've been published by me. Every video is watermarked. The police are at Speaker's Corner every single week, and I'm not aware of any action being taken against either of those individuals.
What are the police doing at Speaker's Corner? Just watching on?
So you mentioned the woman who got slashed in the face. That was actually Hatun Tash again. The police were stood straight in front of her when she got stabbed in the face, and after the act, they then slowly responded, and the perpetrator got away. Like, the police were there, a woman got stabbed in the face, and the police did nothing. I've been there where the police have where violence has kicked off and the police have moved away because it was too much for them to control. Speaker's Corner has a real problem of extremist violence.
And people talk a lot, Joseph, about two-tiered policing. What you're telling me about here is the embodiment of two-tiered policing, allowing the abuse towards you and other preachers and simply turning a blind eye to that.
100%. I am absolutely positive. Had that been a white, racist skinhead throwing up a Nazi salute or threatening to burn a Jew, there would have been a lot of attention on the story. They would have rightfully been arrested, just as the individuals we saw should have been picked up by the authorities. But that's not the case, because there is two-tiered policing, at least in my opinion or my experience, when it comes to the enforcing of anti-Semitism and racism.
And what does that say to you and the Jewish community in as far as the seriousness or the lack of policing of anti-Semitism?
For me, I feel like the police are almost out of their depth. They don't know how to control different forms of racism, where some is enforced and others isn't. And as a Jewish person, it leaves me vulnerable. It leaves me questioning, do I have a future in this country? Is this a place that's going to be safe to raise a family? If things continue, since the October the 7th, there's been over a 1,300%, not 130, 1,300% rise in anti-Semitism, according to the police. And that's the stuff that's getting reported. I'm not sure. I doubt both of those incidents. Well, one of them was before October the 7th, but I doubt the second one has been registered or logged. And so for such a rise in anti-Semitism and an inability to police it, it leaves me and many others questioning, do we have a future here? And I feel as English as can be. My family have lived here for centuries, but I question the future for my kids.
Vile assaults, abuse, planned murders, slashing. Do you fear where this might end, Joseph?
I think every single person that attends Speaker's Corner is worried where this may end. And Speaker's Corner is almost a microcosm for society, because it's a free speech place where different communities, different political ideologies, religious creeds come and engage in intellectual debate and conversation. And it's violence every week.
Well, I wish you were here under happier circumstances, Joseph. But I want to sort of give you my support. I'm sure people watching this will too. This has to stop. If you're watching this, the police force. If you're watching this and you're hearing Joseph Cohen talking about this vile abuse, you've just seen the evidence live on screen. As he said, no doubt, if this was a so-called right-wing extremist, they'd be doing porridge by now. They'd be getting nicked. Why aren't these individuals? It needs to be stamped out before something dreadful happens at Speaker's Corner. Used to be a global high watermark of freedom of expression, the ability to speak without fear or favour in a free society. It seems to me that is ending. Joseph Cohen, thank you very much for joining us, and be safe out there. OK, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. We're discussing an embarrassing incident for the Royal Navy. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Let's bring you the latest developments in the hunt for the suspected chemical attacker Abdul Azidi. The Metropolitan Police says that a 22-year-old man has been arrested today on suspicion of assisting an offender. He's since been released on bail this afternoon, and the Metropolitan Police has also said it's recovered the mobile phone of Abdul Azidi and is now focusing its search on South London. A £20,000 reward still being offered for any information that could lead to his arrest after last week's attack injured a mother and hurt her 2 young children. Police have warned those helping him will face arrest, and they've called again for the public's help in tracking him down. Meanwhile, the Defence Secretary says the UK won't hesitate to respond again to the Houthis' attacks in self-defence. The Prime Minister earlier said their illegal campaign on commercial shipping in the Red Sea is having economic consequences. And in the United States, the White House says the US plans to launch more airstrikes against Iranian-backed groups there in the coming days. But Yemeni rebel leaders say the latest UK-US airstrikes won't stop them from continuing to target ships. A 14-year-old has been charged with the murder of 2 teenagers in Bristol last week. He is the 7th person to be charged in connection with the deaths of 15-year-old Mason Rist and 16-year-old Max Dixon. They were stabbed in Knoll West, that's south of the city, last weekend. And a whole day of snow could be on the way, with a yellow weather warning issued for large parts of England and Wales for later this week. The Met Office saying winter weather could lead to disruption with power cuts and maybe travel delays. And that warning running from 3 a.m. Thursday to the same time on Friday morning, affecting stretches from Cumbria and the Scottish borders down to Cambridgeshire and the Midlands in England, and all of northern and central Wales included in that warning too. For the latest on those stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen. Or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
A quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound buying you $1.2532 and €1.1676. The price of gold is £1,614.44 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 is closed for the day today at 7,612 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, hundreds of firearms officers have quit the Met Police after one of their colleagues was charged with murder. And some might say, who can blame them? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system. And
so there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:38. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, in a few minutes, I'll talk about why hundreds of firearms officers have quit the Metropolitan Police. But now to the worrying news that hundreds, the same story, have quit the police in the last few months. They've resigned after one of their colleagues was charged with the murder of Chris Cabba. Cabba died from a single gunshot after being stopped by police in South London, if you recall, in September 2022. Well, I'm joined now in the studio by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Peter, welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure. A lot of people will be looking at this case and thinking, well, you can't blame them. I mean, the police don't seem to have the backs of their own gaffers.
I am a former firearms officer. I've had that gun oil under my fingernails, gone through the training, albeit many years ago, and faced those decisions out on the street. Do I pull the trigger or don't I? So I'm fairly well placed to understand the frustrations that firearms officers are going through at the moment. And I'd like to make clear, this story is very, very different from the story a few weeks ago when armed police officers laid down their weapons and didn't carry out their work. This story today is of about 10% of the entire Metropolitan Police armed firearms officer capacity saying this job is no longer for me and simply walking away from that work.
And that is a lot of armed coppers who don't want to carry guns anymore. The force has lost more than 250 authorised officers. It's the highest in 4 years and a worrying trend. Why do you think they're doing it?
And just to put it into perspective, in the previous year, they lost 22. So that's a huge increase in the amount of officers not doing it. Now, every armed fire officer, and armed officers carry out very different roles. You've got the men and women that are guarding Parliament and Downing Street and royalty and that kind of stuff. You've got the armed response vehicles who patrol the streets 24 hours a day and instantly respond to any kind of incident and are often those who have to end up pulling the trigger, albeit that's rare. And then you've got the counter-terrorism specialist firearmed officers who are incredibly fit and highly trained for a marauding terrorism attack, for example. So different jobs, but they all understand without any shadow of a doubt that if they have to pull that trigger, their actions will be scrutinised, and that is not what they're complaining about. What they are unhappy about, though, is that process of scrutiny. It takes too long. It's not regarded as being independent, and it has a huge impact on officers and their lives. What they want is a fair, fast, professional and just system.
Now, Peter, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but losing this many armed coppers surely is a recipe for lawlessness, a recipe that the mob know the police are weaker, and that is a recipe for disaster.
It could have an impact. But there again, you see, if we talk about the Metropolitan Police in broader terms, unfortunately the streets have largely been surrendered to the criminals anyway, many years ago, when the police stopped patrolling, because all those university-educated senior officers said, well, you can't measure the effectiveness of a police officer who goes out on the street for 8 hours and just walks and talks. They didn't realise that an officer like that can come back into the police station awash with tea and awash with information.
Yeah. Yeah. And so where's this heading? I mean, have you heard stories of just the utter lawlessness that's embraced in London now?
Every day I hear dreadful stories which involve police inactivity. The worst one that came my way over the weekend was of a restaurant worker who was stabbed twice, once in the neck and once in the face, by somebody wielding a very sharp metal pen. The police didn't turn up, but security officers from a company called My Local Bobby, who patrol in a number of beats and whom I have zero connections with and no financial interest whatsoever, they turned up and they endeavoured to arrest the man responsible for the stabbing. During that struggle, one of the security guards got stabbed in the hand. So now we've got a man who stabbed 2 people a total of 3 times. They called the Metropolitan Police. Nobody turns up. So they decide to walk the suspect to Leicester Square, where they know there are uniformed officers patrolling. They present this person arrested for those stabbings to 2 uniformed officers from the Met who said, we're not going to do anything. Take him back to his hotel.
What?
Yes. So nothing was done. This person who'd stabbed 2 people should have been arrested and taken to a police station and put in a cell and interviewed and subjected to the entire criminal justice system. 2 uniformed cops from the Met told the 2 security guards from the company My Local Bobby to drive him back to a hotel where this person was allegedly staying.
Peter Blexley, it's not often you'll get me lost for words. I'm astonished.
Yes.
I'm astonished that could happen on British streets.
And so are many, many people, and police officers who proudly served in the Met for 30 years or more are now saying, I'm ashamed to say I once worked for that organisation, which remains in special measures. Now, I'm not taking away from much of the good work that is done, and let's hope the net is tightening on Azidi this evening. I'm not taking away from the fact that many frontline police officers are dedicated to what they do, and for that the public, including me, I'm sure, are grateful. But the organisation is a mess. The public are being failed. The crooks are getting away with it far too many times.
Peter Blexley, we have to leave it there, but we have to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for coming, and I can't believe that. Right, Northern Ireland has a Republican First Minister for the first time. Is it a big step on the road to a united Ireland? We'll have that debate next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Just incredible.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these 2 strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 5:47. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, it's an embarrassing incident once again for the Royal Navy. One of its two conventionally powered aircraft carriers, HMS Queen Elizabeth, is unable to take part in a major NATO operation due to a mechanical fault. Exercise Steadfast Defender is the largest NATO exercise in Europe since the Cold War, and joining me now is former NATO commander and Royal Navy officer Rear Admiral Chris Parry, CBE. Thank you for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure, Chris. Chris, first of all, Queen Elizabeth, HMS Queen Elizabeth can't set sail. We also saw at the weekend a number of Type 45 cruisers haven't got the right bombs on board because they ran out of money. Instead, those ships are filled with treadmills. My question is quite simple. Britannia used to rule the waves, and now it seems the Navy's reputation has sunk to an all-time low.
Evening, Martin. Yeah, Type 45 destroyers, they weren't fitted with a land attack capability. That was a choice based on prioritising its air defence system. There's only so much money every year that goes on these things, and people made the choice at the time. I was one of those that said, this is crazy. We can't really have this. You know, the future environment will need these weapons. But people who thought they knew better made a different decision. The fact of life is, Martin, is that peace at sea doesn't keep itself and defence doesn't come cheap. And I'm afraid to say, during our time in Afghanistan and Iraq, our Navy was benchmarked way too low against the sort of opposition we were facing there. I'm afraid people didn't anticipate that Russia and China and Iran will come along, despite being warned by most of us. And in an electoral democracy, all people think about is probably the next election. They don't think about the strategic context out to the future and what will be required.
And Chris, we've also seen the backdrop of a 22% decline in Navy and Royal Marines recruits. So few, in fact, they're decommissioning ships. What's the answer to this? I mean, there's rumours of some more budget being found, and we send billions to Ukraine. Why not spend it on our own Navy?
Well, Martin, it's all about choices. I'm afraid our politicians don't think there are many votes in defence, so I'm afraid every year it gets cut. And the problem is they say they go for the tail rather than the teeth. But if you cut the tail too much, the teeth fall out anyway because you get to the gums. And I'm afraid we're at that point now. They've underinvested in the Royal Navy. They knew in the integrated review in 2019 that we would prioritise our maritime-based capability. And I'm afraid they've failed to invest. There's a critical lack of strategic appreciation. They haven't balanced the outcomes they want with the means, that's the resources available, and the military practicality. I'm afraid to say that those of us who've been, I'm afraid, sniping from the sidelines have been saying for the last 15 years that unless you invest in our capability, in our people, it'll all wither on the vine, and you'll simply be going through the motions. And we've seen, I'm afraid, with our carriers, the design, I suspect, the manufacture and the maintenance routines mean that you've got essentially a civilian design going to sea as a warship. And you always get failures like this, I'm afraid, if you do it on the cheap. If you put cheap components in, they're going to fail. I joined the Navy ages ago. People say the Mary Rose, but no, I joined the Navy a long time ago, which was stress tested practically every component that we had. We used to joke that even the cushions were designed to withstand a 1,000-pound bomb. We don't do that anymore. We go for the cheapest option. I once sat next to one of the crew that went to the moon in 1969, and I said to him, what do you remember most of all about that trip? And he said, you know what? We were lying upside down in the capsule waiting to blast off in 1969. And Neil Armstrong said to me, he said, do you realize every component in this has gone to the lowest bidder just before they blasted off for the moon? But you know what? It feels like that now. We're underinvesting. We're doing things on the cheap, both with our personnel and our equipment. And this is what you get.
And Chris, as well as a financial lack of focus, do you think there's a sort of philosophical lack of focus? Wars, very unfashionable, isn't it, in the modern day? They'd rather focus on climate change, on net zero, and even on the recruitment. It all seems to be about LGBTQ, and damn the white working classes who fought generations of war, both in the armed forces and all in the Navy, of course. Is this now payback time for successive governments that have simply taken their eye off the right priorities?
Well, Martin, my own view is that successively, the sort of things that made the services different, the ability to give them good accommodation, good allowances, making it easy for them to travel rather than have to go four in a car, for example, have just been eroded. They've chipped away at practically everything that makes the job different and distinctive. And I'm afraid to say the goodwill with which people joined the armed forces, the goodwill that says, look, we'll go the extra mile, we'll risk our lives and our limbs for our country, has just been eroded. People don't join the forces primarily for the pay or the allowances. They join, the best do, they join to serve their country, look after the people whom they love. But there comes a point where if you make life so difficult for people who spend a lot of their time at sea away from home, they just say, look, why would I bother? I'll have to say the best recruiting sergeant is a war. And if you have armed forces that look as if they mean business, they're respected around the world, they're respected by the British people, people will join. It's as simple as that. But right now, to use the sort of young parlance, people are disrespecting our armed forces. I see every Saturday citizens of this country actually wanting people to attack British servicemen and women in the Red Sea. I mean, it's a ridiculous situation. And if we don't get the political courage to say this is unacceptable and we need to actually support our people, then nobody's going to join the armed forces.
I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for joining us on the show. Former NATO commander and Royal Navy officer, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, CBE. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I think he's bang on. Peter Blexley said earlier on that the police are simply giving up the battle. The Navy giving up. Lack of money, lack of focus, lack of priorities. Is that the way this country is heading? Meanwhile, we've been talking about endless people claiming asylum. Loads to talk about. Jubes and Co. after me. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6. I've been Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Many of us will see a bit of rain at times through the next few days, but as we see something colder later on in the week, there's also the risk of some snow. For the time being, we have a frontal system still lingering across parts of Scotland. This has already brought a fair amount of rain so far today and will continue to do so as we head into this evening. But the rain pushes its way southwards overnight into southern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later northern England. To the north of this, we will see some clear skies, but also a scattering of showers showers and some colder air. So watch out for the risk of some sleet, some snow and also some icy patches tomorrow morning. A milder start though further south, many places staying in double figures overnight, though it is going to be rather cloudy with a few spots of rain. As we go through tomorrow, that rain band then will continue to edge a bit further southwards, pushing into more central parts of England and also Wales, staying drier towards the south, though a largely cloudy day here. Any sunshine will be pretty limited. A greater chance of seeing some sunny skies further north as Scotland